The stars stretched endlessly across the black sky, sparkling like scattered diamonds. In the silence of space, the Xylarian fleet moved with precise coordination, their massive ships cutting to the void like knives through cloth. Admiral Karan, the fleet's leader, watched the vast formation from the bridge of his command ship. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the holographic display of Earth below. "We have the coordinates," Karan said, his voice low but firm. "Prepare for entry into the border zone. Earth lies ahead." Behind him, officers whispered nervously, some of them still haunted by the warnings from the Galactic Council. "The Council said Earth's borders are dangerous," Lieutenant Vereen reminded him, her tone cautious. "They warned all civilizations to avoid conflict there. Ignoring it could mean total annihilation." Karan's jaw tightened. "Warnings are for the weak," he snapped. "We are Xylar. We do not retreat. The Council has no authority over us." The fleet surged forward, entering the thin veil of Earth's border. At first, there was nothing, only the silent stars and the faint glow of Earth in the distance. The officers began to relax, convinced that the Council's warnings were exaggerations. But then, the first anomaly appeared. A small scout ship at the edge of the fleet flickered and disappeared from the sensors. The crew gasped in shock. "Impossible," muttered the communications officer. "It just vanished." Karan's expression did not change, but subtle tension rippled through his team. "Check the scanners again. All ships report." "All ships accounted for, except the scout," another officer replied. Karan ignored it and gave the order to continue. "We advance. Earth will be ours in 3 hours." Yet the sense of unease grew with every passing minute. Ships flickered in and out of existence on the sensors, and strange energy readings pulsed through the fleet. Engineers scrambled to understand the anomalies, but nothing in their manuals or past experience explained what was happening. On Earth, far below, a team of humans monitored the approaching fleet. They had anticipated this moment for decades. Commander Alara stood in the control room of a massive underground facility. Her eyes were fixed on the screens, which displayed the incoming Xylarian vessels. "They didn't listen," she said softly, almost to herself. "They never listen." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Jarin, looked uneasy. "Commander, their fleet is enormous. Can we hold them?" Ilara's gaze was steady, unwavering. "They think we are weak. They think we are alone. They have no idea what lies beneath their eyes." The humans had prepared for this moment meticulously. Advanced cloak defense satellites, automated weapons, and strategic energy fields were ready, waiting silently for the right moment. But Alara knew patience was key. They had to let the aliens overextend themselves before striking. Back in space, Karan's overconfidence blinded him. He laughed, seeing the blue and green orb of Earth growing larger in the viewports. "Soon, this planet will be ours. Prepare the fleet for deployment." And then a chilling silence fell. The communication officer froze, staring at the blinking console. "Sir, we're losing ships." More disappearing. Karan's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Ships just vanished from the sensors, Admiral. It's happening to the cruisers, frigates, even the assault units. Half our fleet is unaccounted for." Karan slammed his fist on the console. "Impossible. Nothing can hide from Xylar sensors." The panic was subtle but spreading. Officers whispered urgently, scanning for explanations. The fleet was large, powerful, and confident, yet they were slowly losing control. Ships blinked out of existence in mid-space, leaving no trace behind. On Earth, Alara watched each movement with precision. Her hand hovered over a control panel. "Let them enter," she said quietly. "We strike when they are in position." In one of the smaller Xylar ships, Captain Ryle stared at the sensor readings, disbelief etched on his face. "This isn't natural," he said. "It's like something is erasing our ships from existence." Karan's face darkened with fury. "Do not question my command. Continue forward." But even as he spoke, another ship blinked out. The bridge lights flickered briefly as energy spikes coursed through the fleet. The officers were growing restless. Fear had entered the hearts of even the bravest commanders. Hours passed. The fleet continued its advance, but the pace had slowed. Ships that were once bold now hesitated, waiting for orders that might never come. Each disappearance sent ripples of fear through the ranks. Quran's confidence began to crack. In the human command center, Ilara's calm eyes scanned the fleet's movements. She had studied them for years. Their formations, their psychology, their arrogance. She knew exactly how to exploit it. Deploy the decoys, she ordered. Make them think they are in control. Let fear do the work for us. Energy pulses radiated across the border zone, invisible to the alien sensors, but devastatingly effective. Ships blinked in and out of existence. Systems overloaded. Communications failed. And still, Quran pressed forward, blinded by pride. By the time the first strike truly began, the Xylar fleet was in chaos. Ships that had ignored centuries of warnings were now scrambling to survive. Orders conflicted. Leadership was questioned. Panic spread like wildfire. And then the last warning came. A desperate call from the fleet's rear, transmitted just before disappearing. They are everywhere we cannot hold. The transmission ended in static. Silence followed. Quran stared at the empty space where ships had once been. The enormity of the situation hit him. The fleet, his pride and strength, was being erased before his eyes. His voice shook as he tried to regain control. Prepare to retreat. But retreat was no longer an option. The humans had planned this perfectly. Every path, every exit, every movement had been anticipated. The aliens had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price. In the quiet control room on Earth, Ilara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had warned them. She had given the galaxy a message. Earth's borders were not to be crossed. And yet, they had ignored it. Somewhere in the distance, hidden behind clouds and mountains, the first of the alien ships disappeared completely. The human defenses remained unseen, like shadows in the dark, waiting patiently. Quran looked at the blinking sensors, at the emptiness where his fleet had been. His pride had brought him here. And now he realized overconfidence could destroy even the mightiest. The desperate call had been heard, and the war for Earth had only just begun. The emptiness of space was no longer peaceful. Where the Xylarian fleet had once moved confidently, now there was chaos. Ships blinked in and out of existence. Crews screaming over broken comms, alarms ringing endlessly. Admiral Quran stood frozen on the bridge of his command ship, gripping the edge of the console so hard his knuckles turned white. "Report," he barked, his voice sharp, but even he felt a tremor of fear in it. "Sir, nearly half the fleet is gone," the communications officer said, voice trembling. "We don't know how or why." Quran's eyes narrowed. He had faced countless battles, worlds that fell before him, empires that crumbled under his hand. Yet this was something else, something he could not control. "Divert energy to the shields," Quran ordered, but before the engineers could react, another ship blinked out. This time, it was the flagship of the second wing. Hundreds of Xylarian soldiers were gone in an instant, their screams unheard in the silent void. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Vereen shouted, backing away from the main console. The council, they weren't exaggerating. "Something is hunting us." Quran's pride roared against the panic, threatening to consume him. "No, we are Xylar. Nothing hunts us. Nothing." But as he spoke, the sensors began to flicker violently. Strange energy readings, like waves of invisible force, passed through the fleet. Lights stuttered on the command bridge. Alarms howled. And yet, no enemy was visible. "Sir, there's a pattern," a young officer said, pointing to the display. "The disappearances, they're not random. Something is targeting the fleet strategically." Quran leaned in, studying the screen. "Targeting us? How?" "I don't know, Admiral, but every strike hits the largest ships first. They vanish without a trace." A deep, cold silence filled the bridge. The officers stared at one another, the unspoken fear heavy in the air. Quran's mind raced. Pride, overconfidence, arrogance, these had brought him victories before. But now, doubt crept into his thoughts like a shadow. Meanwhile, across the void, Earth's defenders watched silently. Commander Ilara's fingers hovered over the control panel. Her calm blue eyes scanned the chaos unfolding. She did not rejoice, not yet. Victory required patience, precision, and timing. Target the main wing, she said quietly. Let them think they have escaped. Wait for the optimal moment. The human forces had prepared for decades. Advanced cloak defense satellites, energy pulse cannons, automated strike drones, all invisible to alien sensors. They struck in perfect synchronization, appearing like ghosts in space. Back in the fleet, Captain Ryle's ship shuddered violently. Sir, the energy spikes, shields failing, communications offline. Karan's jaw tightened. Hold position. Do not let panic spread. But panic had already taken root. Small mutinies began in the ranks. Ship captains questioned orders. Crews refused to advance, and fear spread like wildfire. The once mighty Xylarian fleet was now fractured, vulnerable. And then, the first human strike came. A blinding pulse of energy erupted near the rear of the fleet. Ships closest to the blast were ripped apart, metal twisting, engines exploding in a silent ballet of destruction. Alarms screamed on every remaining bridge, but there was no visible attacker. Just sudden, precise annihilation. Karan's face went pale. How? What? He stammered. Identify the source. The sensors provided no answers. There was nothing. No human ships, no weapon signatures. Only the wreckage drifting silently in space. Sir, we are losing control, Lieutenant Vereen whispered. They are too powerful. Karan's pride clashed with terror. He could not admit defeat, yet reality pressed hard. His fleet, the strongest armada in the sector, was being destroyed by an invisible enemy, and every strike was deliberate, targeted, precise. As the Xylarian ships scrambled, humans continued their silent assault. Small satellites, cloaked and unseen, struck energy nodes, disabling shields of the larger ships. Automated drones, faster than any Xylarian fighter, tore through engines. It was a perfect combination of strategy, technology, and patience. On the bridge of his command ship, Karan barked orders, but the chaos had grown too large. Messages overlapped. Alarms merged into an unbearable noise. Crew members froze in fear. Some muttered prayers, some screamed, and the fleet kept disappearing, one by one. This is not warfare, Ryle shouted, his voice cracking. It's something else, something beyond comprehension. Karan's face turned red with fury. We are Xylar. We do not retreat. But retreat was impossible. The humans had set traps, corridors of energy fields, and cloaked weapons that cut off every exit. Every ship that tried to pull back vanished before it could escape. In the midst of chaos, a lone Xylarian vessel tried a desperate maneuver, sending out a distress call. All fleets, be warned, the humans destroy everything. The message ended abruptly, swallowed by static. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. On Earth, Elara watched every movement, every disappearance, every failed escape. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. They finally see it, she murmured. They finally understand that Earth is not to be crossed. She leaned over to Jorin, her second in command. Prepare for the next phase. Let fear spread to the remaining forces. Let confusion reign. By the time we strike directly, they will have destroyed themselves. In space, Karan's pride was shattered. Ships he had considered invincible were gone. Soldiers he had trusted were no longer alive. And yet, he refused to give up entirely. Regroup! Regroup immediately, he shouted, though even he did not know if it was possible. We will fight, we will survive. But survival seemed like a distant dream. The Xylarian fleet, the once great armada, was fractured and on the brink of annihilation. Crew members abandoned discipline, firing weapons randomly, tried to escape the invisible assault. Panic ruled over strategy. And then, just as the remaining ships tried to rally, another strike hit. This time, the energy pulses were more powerful, more precise. Ships were ripped apart mid-flight, pieces floating silently into the void. Karan's command ship shook violently, alarms screaming, but the humans remained unseen. Commander, Ryle gasped, looking at Karan. We are losing everything. There is nothing we can do. Karan's eyes burned with a mix of rage and fear. Pride had brought him here. Pride had blinded him to warnings. Now, pride was all that remained as he watched his fleet crumble around him, on Earth. The control room remained calm, but the humans knew the battle was far from over. The first strike had broken the fleet, shattered their confidence, and created chaos. The rest would be easier. Ilara leaned back in her chair, her eyes on the remaining alien forces. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "They will not survive the next wave. They will not even see it coming." In space, Koran's desperate attempts to regroup were failing. His communications were silent. The ships around him were gone, and the once mighty fleet had become a ghostly shadow of its former self. Fear had replaced confidence. Panic had replaced strategy. And the humans? They were still hidden, unseen, unstoppable. The first strike was complete, and it had changed everything. The Xylarians had come thinking they were unstoppable. They had ignored warnings. They had mocked Earth. And now, only fragments of the pride remained, drifting silently in the void, waiting for the next inevitable blow. The void of space was no longer the Xylarians' domain. It was a graveyard. Silent debris floated endlessly where ships once moved in prideful formation. Admiral Koran's command ship had survived, but barely. His eyes were red from sleepless hours and endless alarms. Around him, the few remaining vessels huddled, trembling, scattered like frightened insects. Status report. Koran barked, though his voice lacked the confidence it once had. Lieutenant Varine's hands shook as she tapped the console. "Sir, barely a core of the fleet is left. Engines are failing. Weapons are offline. Communication arrays are fragmented. They can't respond." Koran clenched his jaw, staring at the holographic map of empty space. And Earth? Where are the humans? They're not showing themselves, Admiral, Varine said softly. "We detected nothing." Koran's heart sank. He had been a conqueror of worlds, a terror of sectors. Yet here his fleet, his life's work, was being hunted and destroyed by something he could not see, could not understand. Pride alone could not save them. In the silence of Command Bridge, panic began to spread. Captains of the remaining ships whispered to each other, fear evident in every movement. Morale was shattered. For the first time in history, Xylarian soldiers questioned their leaders, their empire, and their survival. Meanwhile, on Earth, Commander Ilara observed the chaos with meticulous calm. Her eyes were sharp, her mind calculating each strike. Humans had anticipated every possible move, every energy pulse, every cloak strike, every hidden trap had been prepared decades ago. The Xylarians were powerful, but arrogance had made them predictable. "Target the core vessels," she said, her voice low but resolute. "Let them believe they still have control. Then strike their engines simultaneously. No escape." Across space, the remaining Xylarian ships tried to regroup. Koran had ordered them into a defensive formation, hoping sheer numbers could protect them. But numbers were meaningless against invisible, coordinated attacks. One by one, engines failed. Shields faltered. Weapons went silent. A cry echoed through the bridge. "Sir, the flagship of the Third Wing vanished." Koran's face turned pale. "Impossible, how?" Captain Ryle's voice trembled. "It's like the fleet is being erased. The humans are everywhere and nowhere." Panic turned to despair. The few remaining ships scattered in random directions, hoping to flee, hoping to survive. But the humans had prepared for this. Strategic energy fields blocked any predictable path. Cloaked satellites struck from all angles. Automated drones tore through engines and systems with surgical precision. The fleet was no longer fighting. It was dying. Koran clenched his fists. We fight to the last ship." But even he knew that fight was meaningless. Every attempt to strike back ended in disaster. Ships blinked out before firing. Weapons melted under invisible energy waves. Systems failed one by one. Some captains began to surrender. Others attempted reckless maneuvers, only to vanish instantly. Fear had consumed the fleet, turning coordination into chaos, pride into despair. In the midst of this, a single Xylarian ship attempted a desperate maneuver. It sent a probe ahead, hoping to detect the source of the attacks. The probe flickered across space, transmitting images back to the command ship. Koran leaned forward, staring at the feed. What he saw made him tremble. The probe sensors revealed shapes moving across space. Fast, invisible, untouchable. Shadows that warped light and energy around them. Ships appeared, struck, and vanished within seconds. The humans were not just using technology. They were controlling the battlefield itself, manipulating space and energy in ways the Xylarians had never imagined. They are ghosts, whispered Ryle. They are everywhere and nowhere. Coron slammed his fist on the console. No, there must be a way to fight back. But there was none. The remaining fleet was reduced to tiny fragments, scattered and isolated. Crews were terrified, unsure if they would live to see the next moment. The void had become a trap, and the humans were predators of unparalleled skill and strategy. On Earth, Elara monitored every movement. She allowed the humans to remain unseen, striking only when necessary. The final phase of the assault was near. Every Xylarian ship that remained was within range of the final energy fields. She tapped the final command into the system. "Engage all," she said. "End it." Across space, invisible forces struck simultaneously. Engines exploded, shields collapsed, and the last functioning ships were torn apart mid-flight. Alarms screamed across the remaining bridges. Voices shouted orders that could not be executed, and the Xylarian fleet, the mightiest armada in known space, was gone. Admiral Coron's command ship shuddered violently. The last of his officers stared in disbelief. "Sir, they're gone. The fleet destroyed." Coron's hand shook. Pride, arrogance, overconfidence, all that had once defined him, was meaningless now. "Impossible," he whispered. We cannot be defeated." But defeat was absolute. The humans had anticipated, prepared, and executed with precision. The once feared Xylarian fleet had vanished, leaving nothing but scattered debris floating silently in the void. In the human control room, Elara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The first wave was complete. The Xylarians had been broken, scattered, humiliated, and yet she knew the war was far from over. "Prepare the next phase," she said to Lieutenant Joren. "Let them feel the true cost of crossing Earth's borders." Even now, hidden in the remnants of space, Coron could feel the enormity of what had happened. The fleet he had relied upon, trusted, and believed invincible was gone. Ships, crews, weapons, all erased without mercy. The humans had not just won. They had rewritten the rules of engagement, showing that intelligence, strategy, and patience could defeat brute force and arrogance. Coron stared out into the black void, his mind racing with possibilities. How could they have done it? How had Earth remained invisible, untouchable, unstoppable? He did not know, but he did know one thing. The humans were far stronger than anyone had ever imagined. The lost fleet was a warning, a message to all who dare ignore Earth's borders. The galaxy would. Remember this day, the day the Xylarians were humbled, the day humanity showed its true power. And somewhere in the shadows, the humans waited, always watching, always ready. For the final chapter was yet to come. The void of space had never been so silent. Where the Xylarian fleet once loomed, a barren emptiness now stretched endlessly. Debris floated like frozen memories of the ships that had once carried thousands of soldiers, each now erased by unseen hands. Even the stars seemed to shine differently over this graveyard. Admiral Coron's command ship drifted alone among the wreckage. His crew, the few who survived, huddled silently in the shadows of the bridge. The once proud leaders of the Xylarian Empire looked upon the devastation with disbelief and horror. "This cannot be real," whispered Captain Ryle, his voice shaking. "The fleet, all of it, gone. Vanished." Coron's hands gripped the edge of his console. He stared at the holographic map, showing what remained. A scattering of lifeless ships, broken beyond repair, drifting endlessly. Pride, arrogance, even fear. Nothing could describe what he felt. Only emptiness. "They underestimated us," he muttered, almost to himself. "The humans." Meanwhile, far below on Earth, the humans observed the aftermath with cold precision. Commander Elara stood in the control room, her eyes scanning the screens that reflected every Xylarian movement. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. Victory was not about pride. It was about survival. "Status?" she asked, her tone calm but sharp. "All remnants of the fleet are neutralized, Commander," Lieutenant Jorin replied. "No functioning ships remain. The Xylarians, they're in complete disarray." Elara nodded. "Good. Prepare the observational satellites. We need to ensure none escape. If even one survives, they will warn others. We cannot allow that." She turned to the main viewport, staring at the vast expanse of space. The debris floated silently, eerie, and motionless. Yet, hidden among it, tiny energy signatures pulsed, remnants of Xylarian systems still flickering weakly. Humanity had not just won a battle, they had sent a message. Back in space, Coron struggled to regain control. He tried to communicate with the few remaining ships, but no responses came. Systems were failing. Panic had replaced discipline. Soldiers whispered prayers. Some cried silently, while others stared blankly at the endless darkness. "This is a massacre," Rao said softly. "We are not soldiers anymore. We are ghosts." Coron's lips trembled. He had known victory before. He had crushed worlds, led fleets to dominate entire sectors. And yet, here he had nothing. Not ships, not soldiers, not power. The humans had erased all of it with strategy, patience, and precision far beyond his imagination. On Earth, Elara allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The humans had kept their presence hidden, striking without mercy. Every Xylarian attempt to escape, to retaliate, had been anticipated. The war had been one-sided, but the galaxy would not know that yet. Humans had learned long ago that power was not in sheer force. It was in control, precision, and intelligence. She turned to her team. "Begin the cleanup. Recover what we can from the debris. Study their technology, their weaknesses, but do not let anyone see us." Even as they moved, silent drones infiltrated the remnants of the Xylarian fleet. Cloaked and unseen, they scanned every wreck, extracting data, memories, energy signatures. Humans had survived because they understood the universe differently than every other civilization. They adapted, anticipated, and struck where least expected. In space, Coron realized the magnitude of the situation. Entire wings of his fleet were gone. Ships that had been considered invincible were erased like they had never existed. And the humans, they were not even visible. He slammed his fist on the console. "We were betrayed. This is impossible. How can a civilization like that exist?" Ryle shook his head. "No betrayal, Admiral. They were waiting. They were patient. They were smarter than anyone we faced." Coron looked out into the void, his mind racing. For the first time, he questioned everything. The arrogance, the pride, the decision to ignore the Council's warning. Humanity had proven itself a force beyond comprehension. Prepare a report to the Council," Coron muttered. "They must know what has happened here." But even that seemed pointless. Words could not capture the scale of what had just occurred. The Xylarians were no longer the dominant power they had believed themselves to be. In this battle, intellect and patience had triumphed over might. On Earth, the humans watched the remaining Xylarian signals fade into nothing. The silence that followed was profound. Commander Elara allowed herself a small, controlled smile. "Let the galaxy learn this lesson," she said softly. "Never underestimate humanity." Yet, she knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the distance, beyond known space, other civilizations would hear of this defeat. Some would fear, some would seek revenge, but none would challenge humanity without caution. Hidden in the shadows of space, small Xylarian escape pods drifted, carrying survivors. They whispered in fear, telling tales of civilization that was invisible, untouchable, and strategic beyond imagination. Their stories would travel far, carrying a warning that would echo through the galaxy. Earth's borders were not to be crossed. Back in the command center, Elara turned her attention to long-term planning. Prepare simulations for future incursions. The Xylarians were only the first. Others will come, and they will test us. We must be ready. Lieutenant Jorin nodded. "Commander, they won't expect us to be so prepared." Elara's eyes narrowed. "That is why they will fail." As the last of the Xylarian signals faded, the humans remained unseen, unbroken, and untouched. The galaxy had been warned. Humanity's might was not in fleets or firepower alone. It was in strategy, patience, and intelligence. The Xylarians had learned that lesson the hardest way possible. In the distance, beyond the debris, a small energy signature flickered briefly, then vanished. It was insignificant to humans, yet it served as a reminder. The universe was vast and threats would always come. But now, humanity had set the standard. The war was over, for now. The galaxy will remember this day. The day humanity protected its home with unmatched skill. The Xylarians had underestimated Earth, and their fleet had vanished entirely. Commander Alara gazed at the stars, her mind already planning the next steps. The humans had shown the galaxy a lesson in power, patience, and precision. Yet, she knew that peace was fragile. The shadows of the universe were always moving, and humanity had to remain ready, always. Somewhere unseen, the first whispers of another fleet began to stir. Other civilizations would take note. They would plan, hesitate, and perhaps fear, and humanity would be ready. The galaxy had witnessed